Hello, and welcome to this Game Developers Vlog, in which I'll be talking about the progress I've made on my latest project, um, which I've talked about in the previous log, and which is going to be a game eventually. That's why I program chiefly. But right now I am working on a tool for making a game, specifically the art tool for making graphics. I need an updated, well, I need a new one because the one I programmed before is really not up to the task, and it's very badly written program. And what you see here is the current state of that program. It's not much at all, but it does show a couple of things that are significant. One of those is in relative to the fact that I've just quite recently decided to really focus on developing for Windows. Previously, I used Windows as a sort of educational playground in which I learned just enough about how to interact with Windows to make it run my programs, but nothing more. So the presentation and their flexibility and user friendliness were quite abysmal. And that was because I really aimed to work on another kind of computer called a Raspberry Pi, which doesn't run Windows, at least not normally. Um, and I felt that, well, I'm just learning programming techniques, not interacting with Windows techniques, because I'm not going to need them for very long. Um, but I've since changed my mind, and I'm now developing for Windows. And so a large part of what I've been doing the last couple of weeks is learning how to really make my program run well with Windows, look good in Windows, and do precisely what I want. And I've made quite a lot of progress. So this is my first ever complete full screen window program, meaning that it covers the entire screen when it runs. Um, well, when you put your so-called focus on it, like you can switch between windowed programs in Windows. Uh, but some programs, when you run them, usually games, they will cover the entire screen, not even have a border or a title bar, with those little minimize, maximize, and end program X and name, all that stuff. Without that, just fill the entire screen. And for me, that's how a proper program looks, because the first many programs I ever came in contact with was before I even knew there was such a thing as Windows. We ran them in DOS or on gaming consoles, and they naturally use all the screen. They were not graphical operating systems like Windows. But anyway, I've been learning that. I've been learning how to make my programs interact with Windows. Far from learned it all, but I'm making good progress. Um, and the second thing is that I've developed a technique for handling graphics. Now, there is plenty of techniques provided in Windows um, for how to handle graphics, and there's a specific processing unit in all modern computers, or nearly all at least, uh, which is there just to handle graphics. At the moment, I'm not using that. I'm avoiding that, and that's because I want to learn how to program in. We could call it a classical style or just an older style in which you really have to write all the graphical instructions yourself. This is a sort of intermediate step because I am going to use that eventually. Because it's just stupid, really, not to avail yourself of the huge amount of processing power in the graphical processing unit. But I want to do this to educate myself, to learn the basics. It's a very good way, I think, of learning basic programming techniques, and also an experiment, and also as an intellectual challenge. So for this project, as far as is possible, at least, I will be using my own uh, version, my own technique for rendering graphics. And I will make a video going into technical detail of how I do that, But this video is not about that. This is just an update on the project. The next one, I'll make that tomorrow or at the latest Tuesday, I think. I think it's going to be an interesting video. This is a subject that lends itself very well to understanding the basic workings of a computer. And it's simple and clear enough that even I, who am a mere amateur, have learned much through it and think I can convey useful information through it as well. It's easy to visualize. So anyway, that's another thing that this represents. This is the first working version of um, my graphics routine, as we often call things when we write code that does a specific thing. We call it a so-and-so routine. Well, I had some versions that worked. I had a prototype before this one, but to implement it the way I wanted and make it work precisely the way I intended, I only succeeded with yesterday. So this is the first ever instance of um, my my own idea of how to handle graphics working just the way I want. So I'm very happy about that. It's good progress. Now, it's not very much progress with regards to the art program, but if I wanted to make it with that routine, I had to clear this step first. Uh, so over the next couple of weeks, you'll see me developing the art program and adding in features that I've been working on lately. You've seen me show spinning graphics, that spinning star that was in one of my earlier videos here, and a few other routines like the circle drawing and all that. I'll be adding all that stuff along with a few more things and developing those techniques. I'll hope to achieve some smooth animation. You might have noticed that the star, when it spun, it was sort of spun in sort of very abrupt uh, increments. That was because it's an inefficient piece of code. I'll try to make it more efficient and smooth, just like these things are moving quite smoothly, which I like. So the very next thing I'm going to develop is also a new thing and a new interaction thing, and that is mouse input, which I've never programmed before. I just started looking into it. It doesn't actually look very tricky, and Windows really does provide a lot of help there. I guess I could basically use the mouse that, even now as I run this program, I can move my mouse around. You can't see it, but I can move my mouse over it, and as far as I understand from what I read, I could just tell my window to recognize a click of this. This is the mouse connected to the desktop. But I would actually like to remove that and have my program run its own mouse uh, function, mouse code. Just for the intellectual challenge. It still seems as though Windows will be very lenient with me with regards to this, but we shall see. It is the next thing on my agenda. And then I think at that point I will have cleared all the significant technical hurdles with regards to interaction with Windows. And then we can get on to actually writing the particulars of my art program. But I've done that before. I've written an art program before, so it's more a matter of production, doing it more neatly than before, much more neatly, and of course implementing several new techniques that's also what you've been seeing on my Instagram and so on. I developed plenty new techniques for working with graphics, so it should be I think, mostly fun experience. And I've noticed lately that my expectations with regards to coding are much more realistic. When I think that something is going to be complicated, it usually is, and when I think it's easy, it usually is. So I have a better grasp of what I am capable of in what span of time. I'm not always right. Sometimes I'm surprised, but much more so now than before. It's a bit funny because what I'm doing now, my capabilities right now, and working with graphics this way, the way I'm able to implement graphics right now, since yesterday, that is basically the way I thought. I thought it would be so simple. I thought I would basically start at this point. That implementing graphics in this way would be just a matter of using some simple commands. But in the basic, what is called the standard library, I'll explain what that is, but a library of tools or functions, you might say, in the programming language that I'm using, which is C++. There aren't really good functions for that. You have to acquire, I think they're called external libraries to do that, graphics libraries. And I will, but not for this program. So let me just play around a little bit with this, because what's happening is I'm moving 3 dots around. 2 of them move on their own. The blue one and the green one, they move across the screen. When they reach the end of the screen, they reset to their original position. And the pink one, I can move with my arrow keys. What I'm most happy about with this is the smoothness with which they move. That is the big thing. If there's anything new with regards to graphics in this program, and within the context of my progress as a programmer, it is this smooth animation. I've never done anything like this before, so that's, if you take anything away apart from the pretty colors, it should be the smoothness of this movement. Now it looks a bit jerky. I can, especially when I turn a corner, and I think that has to do with it reacts fast enough if I just press the keys repeatedly. But if I hold one key down and then switch to holding another key down, it makes a bit of a pause. That must be because when I press and hold a key, it waits a while before it recognizes that the key is being held down, and I'm not just a very slow clicker. And I hope there's a good way of adjusting this this interval, telling that you should recognize that the key is being held down almost immediately after a few milliseconds. Because obviously, if you're building a racing game or something, you want to be able to hold an accelerator button or something like that, and you immediately change directions. Maybe a racing game isn't a good analogy, but let's say you have a top-down flying or running around game, and you want to be able to change directions fast. This doesn't really allow for that unless you click frenetically, and that's just not how people play games, and haven't played games for many decades, if ever. Maybe at the very beginning of action games, the very few first action games might have been as annoying as that, but I'm not sure. That was in the early 70s, if ever. So there you go. That's this update. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you look forward to the upcoming ones. I do. So with that, I bid you a good time of day, and goodbye.